Hello and welcome to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy,
And I'm Claire.
and we're here to talk about some of the disturbing things that go on in the world, past and present. We feel like not knowing doesn't mean the crazy doesn't exist.
So we're going to scar you with the knowing.
Enjoy. Claire, what do you got for us today?
Today we're headed to Texas in the 2000s, and I realize I've been picking on Texas, but it's because they're big, so they engulf a whole lot of criminal activity as well. I'm just going to give you a heads up on this one. The names are redacted, so they're all initials. So I named them for you, so just so you know.
All right.
Except for the feller. The victims in the case, the names are redacted, okay?
So we've got pretend names. Got it.
But we're going to start off at 1:45 a.m. on July 23rd, 2000, when the New Braunfels police get a 911 call regarding a woman found bound and partially nude.
Oh.
Now, once identified, that would lead Officer John Sullivan being dispatched to her home, since they determined she had children who were potentially home alone, or since obviously mom is found.
How did they figure out that she has kids?
Look, lady, you're getting ahead of the story.
You just said it.
Look. Yeah, but you're getting ahead of the story.
They found a bound, tied up lady, and they're like,
I'm just telling you the story's going to start with this officer gets to the house.
Her hips look wide. She must have done birthed some children. Let's go check out her place of residence. Okay.
When he gets to her house, the front door is not open, or it's not wide open, but ajar. But so he's armed with his flashlight and enters the home.
That's a terrible idea.
And noticed, like, the carpet on the floor is bunched up, clothes are flung all over the living room. And to him, it looks like there was a struggle in the living room.
So he goes in armed with a flashlight?
Yeah.
That's a terrible idea.
Well, maybe he doesn't want to scare the children.
Then don't go in the house. Got news for you. Be scarier for an intruder to be in the house. And since the door is open, that's a bad idea to go in with just a flashlight.
Well, so he goes in. He finds the back door, which was unsecured, but closed with a hasp that appeared to have been pried loose from the door, but no padlock. Now, I don't know if you know what a hasp is, but it's that long strip of metal with a hole in it that most people will use to lock doors with a padlock, that thing.
All right.
Anyway, he doesn't find any other signs of forced entry, so Officer Sullivan heads towards the bedrooms, where he finds two children, a little girl that I'm going to call Demi. She's roughly 4 years old, and a little boy roughly 2 years old, who I'm going to call Randy. Now they're both laying there in their mother's bed. Randy was asleep. When Officer Sullivan had entered the room, Demi pulled the covers up to her chest and closed her eyes real tight, pretending to be asleep.
Uh-huh.
I know, I was doing the whole... It's got to be scary.
It sounds like it wasn't the first time some weirdo's been in her bedroom.
Or somebody's been checking to see if she's asleep.
Some weirdo in her bedroom.
He would tell her that he was a police officer, which made her open her eyes. Now, initially, Demi wasn't upset, but when the officer started to talk to Demi, she got very upset and was crying. He would ask her name, and she would tell him. He would ask her if everything was okay or not. She would say, "No, Mommy is dead."
What?
Officer Sullivan would ask her what happened to Mommy. She would say, "A bad man killed her and took her away." Mind you, this scared little girl is crying when she's telling him all this.
Aw, that breaks my heart.
Now you feel bad for making fun of it.
I don't.
Anyway, so a little bit about Demi's mom.
Wait.
Mary.
I was spot on, though. I said it wasn't the first time that some creep has been in the room. And I was right.
Maybe. Yeah. So Mary would be Demi and Randy's mom. She lived in the Canthus family home with her children, Demi and Randy. Also with her fiance, Chris, who was the grandson to the Canthuses. I couldn't find if the Canthuses actually lived there. I feel like they owned the house, so that's why they were saying it was their home.
Let them live in it.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, they lived there, so it's a couple with their two kids, with another couple, Adrian, his wife Yolanda, whose parents owned the house. So you've got Mary, who's engaged to the people who own the house's grandson, and then Yolanda is their daughter.
So she lives with her fiance's mother?
Grandparents.
What? No, the grandparents own the house. The daughter lives in the house, and then they live with the mother, right? Yolanda is,
Oh, yeah. Well,
yeah. So
so
if Yolanda is the house owner's daughter, and the boyfriend's or fiance's son, then it sounds like either it's a whole lot of family in one teeny tiny house,
it sounds like it.
or the grandparents own the house, let their daughter live there, and her son just failed to launch.
So so it's Yolanda's parents.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see where it wasn't her son. So Chris is not her son. You know what? I didn't even catch that when I was writing it up. Anyway, Adrian and Yolanda live there. They're related. Adrian, that's his step, or not step. God dang it, Andrew, you got me all confused with my own shit. They're his in-laws that own the house. And he's married to Yolanda, and his children, they had moved things in, but they stayed there on and off. So Yolanda works during the day and Adrian would work nights. So typically he would sleep in the living room, but they were usually in and out. But they would also come through that side door because the keys were usually under the flower pot. But besides that, they usually didn't lock the door anyway.
All right.
So Mary had known Adrian for roughly 3 years and had conversation with him before. I feel like since it's all like they're all related in some way, either by marriage or somebody's grandson or whatever. So that's who's living there. The Cantuses had been on vacation in Las Vegas that night, and that's where it doesn't sound like they live there. Otherwise, this house is way bigger than I was thinking if you've got 3 couples living there. Not to say it couldn't happen, but
Or it's really cramped.
yeah, there could be that. But then I also left room for they could all live there because if Adrian and his wife would sleep in the living room, that makes me think it's a 2 bedroom and the Cantuses live in one and Mary lives in the other with her kids and Chris.
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on.
Yeah. So what happened? Now, earlier in the day, Mary had taken her children to a birthday party, got home around midnight, which I thought was wild, but
I just did a hard blank on that one. They're 4 and 2.
Yeah, I would not want to be out till midnight with a.
First of all, whose birthday did they go to? Because that sounds like it was not a child's birthday party, in which case I don't feel like it was appropriate to bring 2 young children to an adult's birthday that was going to last until midnight.
So I was hoping, since clearly this is a close family, that it was a
family
family
thing, and
gathering.
yeah.
And the kids were probably asleep in another room. She decided to head home at midnight, kind of thing.
From the way it sounds, all the family lives at her house. So
anyway, so she gets home around midnight, tucks the kids into her bed, and starts some laundry. Then when she's like waiting on the laundry, she ends up snuggling down with her children and ends up passing out.
damn, women's work never ends, even at midnight.
Yeah. Only to be awakened by someone standing by her bed.
Ah, where's Chris?
Look, I don't know.
All right.
At first, she thought Yolanda was playing a trick on her, but the person came towards her and began touching her face, then started strangling her.
Oh, they. I realize she's about to be our victim, and I might have to take this out. But I just pictured, in like the bad movies or whatever, when it's dark or somebody's recently blind, they touch somebody's face, like aggressively flapping their fingers on somebody's face. I just pictured somebody doing that to her and working their way down to find her neck, and she's just laying there blinking.
You have problems. Oh my You have problems.
Well, I didn't want to just start laughing, but just so you can be on this.
It's too early in the day for you to be drinking.
I only had coffee, I swear. And
Irish?
it was not Irish.
Anyway, naturally, Mary was terrified, but she also didn't want to wake up her children.
What?
So she doesn't cry out, it's a 2 and a 4-year-old. They're not going to help her.
No, but maybe them screaming would wake up or make him go away.
So she tries not to struggle or make any noise.
Oh, does she live? She doesn't live. How do they know?
Would you stop getting ahead of the story?
All right.
That's when she recognizes Adrian.
Hold up.
Even though no words had been spoken, Mary begins to struggle to get free and manages to run for the living room with Adrian on her heels. He grabs her and rips her shirt off just near the bathroom door, pins her to the ground, and starts repeatedly punching her in the face.
So
Adrian, shh, you're breaking it up. Adrian used a pair of socks to tie her arms behind her back, covered her mouth with more clothing from the living room, all while striking Mary while he binds her. Now, once he has her sufficiently restrained, he gets up and heads to the kitchen, where he's rifling around in drawers and cabinets. Mary would manage to get up and run for the door, but the door was shut and she couldn't get it open with the way her hands were bound. Now, Adrian would hear the commotion and go running to the door, grab Mary and throw her down and start hitting her again. All while Mary remained silent for fear of what this man would do to her children.
that's her relative, right?
Well, it'd be by marriage, because her fiance is Chris, who is the grandparent of the homeowner,
Grandson.
and Yolanda is the daughter to the homeowner. So it would be like it wouldn't be a blood relation.
I gotcha.
He's married.
All right.
So then Adrian would tie her hands even tighter and bind her feet to her arms so she's bent kind of in a U shape. Then he places a shirt over her head. Then came the brown plastic bag over her head. Mary, being a quick thinker, managed to chew a hole in the plastic bag to keep from suffocating.
Hell yeah.
I've always been curious. Anytime I've seen, mind you, in a movie where somebody's got a bag over their head, it's about fucking time somebody manages to suck that thing in and chew a hole in it.
I told you that we had watched a movie and somebody, I don't remember what movie it was, but somebody had the bag put over their head and it showed their mouth, like they gasped open and the bag went into their mouth. I was like, why didn't they just grind their teeth and chew a hole? And then my son and I had a discussion about it. And that's the video I had sent you of where he wanted to see if he could do it. So I put a plastic bag over his head to see if he could chew a hole in the bag. And he did it to me too. It was an interesting. You and Dave do your.
You've been sick for a real long time. No, me and Dave do not place plastic bags over each other's heads.
No, but
we
you guys
practice man down drills.
Yeah, and we practiced if a bag gets put over your head, you can in fact get a hole chewed into it. But
all right,
it sounds worse than it is.
It sounds real bad.
But it took all of like 5 seconds to put a hole in the bag. So all these people, I realized that when they panic, I don't understand. But
maybe it's extra thick plastic.
Or no, I'm talking when it's like the grocery bags on their head, but maybe they're unconscious.
You know what? I'm unlucky enough that the majority of the grocery bags I get already have holes in them. So if somebody goes to suffocate me with one of those, they're going to be, nope, this one's bad. Nope, this one's bad.
It reminds me of when we were kids and we'd go to clean the litter boxes out. I'd have to check, and there was like all the bags had holes in the bottom.
I feel like it was you that had the bag and was swinging it around and like you didn't notice till you're out of the kitchen. Somebody left a trail of litter.
That would be me. I think our brother did the same thing, but I started double bagging them, not realizing that, mind you, I was like early middle school, so the intelligence wasn't there.
It's like stacking colanders.
Yeah, pretty much. So it just slowed the amount of cat litter that trickled its way into the next bag.
Is that when you started flushing them in the toilet?
Yeah. You know, Dad, to his dying day, would complain about that. He said the plumbing still wasn't right in that house. And our brother is now inherited that problem. Sorry.
Oh, it could have been prevented with quality plastic.
Or some common sense on my part.
Anyway, so back to Mary. She chews a hole in that plastic bag that was placed over her head. Adrian comes back from the kitchen and puts something in her back that feels thin and rather pointy, so Mary assumes that it's a knife.
It was his penis.
Well,
it was thin and pointy. Sorry.
He asks her where her keys are. He would grab her purse, take her keys and the money she had in there. He would untie her legs, help her up, and tell her not to say a word or something would happen.
Something already did happen. He just failed to kill you.
He would force her into the passenger seat of her car and tell her to stay down. They would drive for a very short bit and stop. Adrian would get out to open a gate. Once he got out of the car, Mary would loosen the socks around her hands, rip the bag and shirt from her head, unlock the car door, and go running. She would recognize where she was the house being Adrian's parents' home, which was not even a mile from the house that she lived at. Mary went running across the street where the police were called. Now, when police got there, they naturally would go across the street and seek to talk to Adrian. Now, Adrian wouldn't be there. His mom would tell Adrian the next morning that police had showed up asking for him and he should go talk to them to clear up this misunderstanding.
Eh,
Now, Adrian would go, "Yeah, no, I was out shooting pool with a friend that night of the attack, and I was outside when Mary came running at me and screamed to call the police. When she saw him, she stopped dead in her tracks and ran the other way towards the neighbor's house,"
right.
which naturally made him panic, and he decided to leave town because he said he had outstanding warrants for his unpaid child support, traffic tickets, and probation violations.
You can get a warrant for your arrest for traffic tickets.
He had 2 DUIs, or
Oh.
DWIs. Now, he would be on the lam for roughly 2 years, which I think is absolutely wild. Because can you imagine how terrified you'd have to be?
No, that's absolutely terrifying.
Now, that's when the police learned that Mary's children are home by themselves, and the officer goes to check the house. I realize she doesn't die, but she came very close to being dead. I don't know what Adrian's big plan was, but it doesn't feel like he thought things through.
Did the kids recognize him? I would assume they did, because he's a relative.
But I don't know if they recognized him because Randy was still asleep. Demi, I feel like she saw something and then closed her little peepers, but she was just scared. And I feel like she was probably peeking out the door and saw her mom tied up and maybe disappeared or like ran and hid kind of thing
Poor baby.
because she didn't want to see it. But that's why poor Demi thought her mom was dead. But they do tell her her mom's going to be okay. So just so you know. But I accidentally stumbled on this one, which is why I realized no one dies in it. However, it was just horrible to read. So eventually, law enforcement would catch up with Adrian, and roughly 2 years later, he would plead guilty to his other tickets and charges and everything, and then proceed with a trial. Now, a little bit about Adrian.
Wait, I have a quick question about him.
Hey.
Did he, whoever married him and made this to where this union was family, all within the family, did they stand by her or him? I realize that it's not a big deal. I'm just curious if you know or not. They might not have advertised the whole, she's a lying slut, or, yeah, he's a piece of shit. Just curious if it divided the family, because it sounds like it's a close family. And shit, if his parents live right down the street, it's a very close, like, they didn't
Yeah.
travel far for their significant others.
No, it was very close.
So I'm just curious if it divided the family.
I didn't look up to see if they were married or not, but that's a good question. I did delve into what kind of individual Adrian was.
Let's hear what you got.
Starting in 1985, he was arrested for felony burglary of a motor vehicle. Apparently, he broke into a used motorhome center and stole a battery and was out on $1,500 bond. The next year, he'd be arrested for a DWI. He was sentenced to 60 days in jail, but was on work release. He also had his license suspended for a year and a $300 fine. He would somehow find and fall in love with a lady named Rosario, and they would get married and welcome a little boy that same year. And then they would welcome another little boy in 89. Then he would be arrested for family violence in 91. He would be arrested again for assault in 92 and get 30 days in jail. At some point in all that, he ends up getting divorced, which I feel like the family violence thing was probably that year.
I'm glad to hear she drew a line.
Yeah. In 97, he has a warrant for back child support and a number of charges for failure to appear on like his DWI charges.
Mm-hmm.
Then he finds Yolanda, and those two get married in October 98, which, by the way, I think it's wild you can have warrants and get married. Don't you have to go to, like, the courthouse? Like, I feel like when they're like, hey, applied for a marriage license. Maybe let's go down the stairs and interrupt the nuptials. Anyway, so he would get charged for aggravated kidnapping and burglary and be sentenced to 20 years for aggravated kidnapping and 35 years for burglary.
What? How is burglary a higher charge?
Oh, right?
Like, how do you get more years for that instead of aggravated kidnapping? What?
I don't know.
He should have also, they should have tacked on, I realize it's not going to get him a lot of years, but child endangerment since the kids were in the bed.
Yeah. Now, he would file an appeal based on the testimony of the officer that entered the home to check on the children. Now, he testified to what the little girl had said to him on the basis of it being an excited utterance, but his defense would say that's insufficient to prove he was the one who had done it. So now, mind you, by the time this goes to trial, Demi is 7.
That sucks because that means for 3 years she hasn't been allowed to forget it.
Well, so they don't have her really testify about it at trial. They end up asking her if she knows the difference between what's the truth and what's not. And when they'll ask her about the night in question, that she'll say she doesn't remember.
Oh.
And I can believe that because it's just like, they're little kids.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So that's one reason why they allow the officer's testimony is that's what she said. She thought her mom was dead. You've got the mom who she does point him out in a lineup when they end up doing a warrant for the whole kidnapping and nonsense. But I thought it was crazy. But then the other side of me, you know how I did that one case that the guy, it seemed like he did it and then he didn't actually do it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I started to look at it from, now mind you, reading his appeal, I did kind of a, because it didn't make sense to me why he would break into somewhere that is normally unlocked and he knows where the key is, because he could just walk in there, steal her shit, and walk out. I didn't understand why he would try to kidnap her at all. And then they fingerprinted her car. They didn't find any of his fingerprints in her car, which I was like, okay, he could have been wearing gloves. I don't know. But it's just like, nothing in the car puts him in the car. He was driving it, supposedly.
But did they find anybody else's fingerprints or hair?
No.
All right.
I just thought it gives enough of like a, And then I was trying to think of, well, what if you figure it's dark. So what if she didn't get a good look at him because she had a bag over her head? And what if, it is weird that it would be, that's who, like he drives to right in front of his parents' house. I would say I'm like 90% he did it, but I did like how did he not have fingerprints in the car?
But they didn't find anybody else's either.
True. Anyway, but I was doing looking at it from both sides of what if that was the case of the bag comes off her head and this poor feller's out smoking a cigarette when she runs over there, looks at him, runs the other way, and he's just going, what the fuck just happened?
He also didn't try to lend aid in any sort of way. So his story already...
If you were outside on your front porch and a half-naked lady's running at you...
It's not a half-naked lady, though. He knows her. It's not some random person. This is your family member. You were just at a birthday party with this lady and her 2 kids. No.
Fine.
He knows her.
I thought it was all weird why he'd kidnap somebody, but I don't want to kidnap anybody. But I don't know what the motivation was, because he could have raped her in the living room, but why was he going to take her somewhere? Like, his parents are at his house.
He had to go get something.
And then I did chuckle a little bit, because when she said she was on the floor of the living room and heard him rifling around in the kitchen, I was like, he needed a snack. But he was trying to get a knife or look for keys.
Have issues. That's another sign that he knew her. He knew where to look for her keys.
Yeah. I think it's wild. Because 3 years, I would think people are more likely to be abducted by a stranger, not somebody they know.
Nuh-uh.
I said I would think. You can't nuh-uh to my thoughts.
You do it to me all the time.
That's because you based your statistics on stupid things.
Nuh-uh. When I say I think, and you sit there and argue with me. Or if I say I don't remember something, you argue with me like that's going to make me remember.
Sometimes it does.
It never does. It's like my brain, if it could have been reminded, it shuts off and is like, nope, we're definitely not remembering this now. Talk to me like that, you son bitch.
You've been sick for a very long time. I just thought it was a wild when I first stumbled on it. Poor little Demi. And then I was like so engrossed in reading it that when she thought her mom was dead, and then I was happy that her mom wasn't dead because she could have been dead.
Yeah, that's sad. I'm glad she was able to forget. I would hope that the fear of having an intruder attack her mother while laying in
Yeah.
bed next to me, I would hope that I was unable to remember all of that and move forward.
Well, and mind you, since everybody lives, that's why their names are redacted. But I didn't want to spoil it for you because when I started reading it, I didn't know if she was going to be alive or not. I just started reading because it wasn't even on the case that I was looking up, the officer's testimony, because that's why it was like the appeal is what was being questioned, whether that was allowed. Anyway,
Hang on.
I was going to say, are you there?
Only 28% of kidnappings are committed by strangers.
Out of how many kidnappings?
100. 100%, 28%.
Are you eliminating like parents who kidnap their children, like custody thing?
I don't know. I just Googled it and it popped up on child safety.
I'd like to know what pool. I think they should eliminate the ones that it's a parent because they're not going to do harm.
Let's change it from kidnapping to abducted.
Well, I don't think you can kidnap an adult.
But you said he got kidnapping charges, right?
Fine.
What's the difference between abduction and kidnapping?
I'm not a doctor. I'm just telling you got aggravated kidnapping charges. It's probably the charge. Or like what it carries with it.
Yeah. This other website says, I looked up abduction by someone you know versus stranger, and it says a non-family abduction occurs when a child is taken by someone who's known but not related to the child, such as a neighbor or an online acquaintance, or by someone unknown to the child. Non-family abductions are the rarest type of case and make up only 1% of missing children. I realize she's not children. I just found that interesting. An abduction is the criminals taking away a person by persuasion, fraud, or by open force or violence. As where kidnapping is by force, threat, or deceit. So it has nothing to do with age.
Yeah. Well, and the aggravated part is apparently when there's the life-threatening portion to it. When something is escalated to aggravated. Simple assault is a misdemeanor. Aggravated assault is a felony. So aggravated kidnapping comes with like that carrier of serious bodily harm.
Oh, God.
What?
You know how on Google it shows you questions other people have asked? Somebody asked, what time of day do most kidnappings happen? And it says school-age children are at greatest risk on school days before and after school. So 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. And just after dinner, 6 to 7.
When they're playing outside before bed.
Mm-hmm. Attempted abductions most often occur on the street while children are playing, walking, or riding bikes. It's terrifying. All within a quarter mile of the child's home.
But that's all I got for that one.
It's scary. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Homicide Hobbies. If we made you laugh, if we made you cry, or if we mindfucked you for the day, then we thank you for listening. Please write a review on whatever you're listening to us on. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers. We're freaking awesome. And join us next week for another episode of Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy.
And I'm Claire.
That's all we've got.